we're excited to have you here in Halifax. This is only like your third or fourth time coming to Halifax.
I used to live in Halifax. I
What?
spent, yes, from the time I was when I was about the summer I turned, I think it was the summer I turned 10 until I was 13. Yes, I spent three of the best preteen years of my life in Halifax. And we've been back I know we played, what's the big arena there? Is it still the Metro Center? Yeah,
It's
I think we
Scotiabank
played
Center now, but yeah, yeah,
Scotiabank Center now.
yeah.
They all have different names now.
I know,
But
yeah.
yeah, we played the Metro Center, and I can't remember if we've been back since then. But I'm so excited to come back. We didn't make it in 23, and I can't remember why, but we didn't make it to Halifax proper. But we were at we played somewhere in Nova Scotia that fall, I think, the fall of 23.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a homecoming.
It is of sorts, yeah. It's funny. It's funny. I have very vivid memories of living in Halifax. So for me, it feels sort of just like yesterday. I remember everything. I remember Spring Garden Road, and I remember hanging out. My mother used to work the Lord Nelson Hotel, and I used to spend my afternoons there after school doing my homework, waiting for her. She was in an administrative position at the hotel, so I used to wait just outside her office and do my homework there. And I used to spend time in the public gardens and all kinds of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
It is all very different.
Yes. So I've heard. I hear it's all changed now.
Yes, so you'll be in for like a shock. You'll be like, wait, that's not exactly how I remember it.
This is not how I left it.
No, I need
They've
to.
changed things. They changed the way I left it.
Yes, where is my time machine?
Where's my stuff?
So getting ready for this, I noticed a lot of times when you were talking about singing, you said you knew from an early age that this was going to be the career. So
Mhm.
was there like zero backup plan? You were just all in?
Yeah, I mean, I started singing professionally when I was, gosh, I think I was just shy of my 16th birthday, so I was 15, and more or less I graduated from high school, but I started while I was still in high school playing professionally. So it was a juggle. It was kind of a weird. It's funny because Halifax actually plays a role in this, because when we moved back to Toronto from Halifax, my dad kind of pulled a fast one on the local high school. I had been in private school for a really long time, and I really wanted to start attending my local public school, so I could meet like some local kids who lived in my neighborhood. And so my dad went in and told them that this was back in the day, you have to remember. So people weren't really keeping track of, like, credits and that sort of thing. So he went in and he kind of maneuvered it so that I wound up I was supposed to be in a grade, I think 9 class, but he maneuvered it. So I wound up really like jumping into grade 11. So I was in classes with kids that were much older than I was, and I ended up graduating early. So I had kind of a weird, in that time, I started playing music. So I was technically still in high school. So I would go to high school during the day and I was playing at night. Then I graduated and there wasn't really any place for me to go. I was like, 16. All my friends were like 18 and they were going off to university. So I was still gigging. So I got a job. I got a little part-time job and I was still taking some high school classes. My dad was like, well, you don't really want to go to university. You know that this is what you want to do. So why don't you take some extra classes? You can learn some extra stuff. My high school was very close to our house. And I started doing that. And I was working a job, an actual job. I was a telephone operator. And I was working at night singing. And couple 3-4 days a week I would still go to high school classes. It was a very odd sort of ending to my high school career. But I graduated and I was touring pretty much by the time I was 16. It was very strange. And my friends would, come and see me sing in bars and stuff. My parents would have to come because I was too young technically to be there.
It's not the best first bar experience when your parents are there.
Well, it's funny. I don't drink, and I never did, and I was never a party kid. I really just wanted to be there for the music, and I think I was really lucky too that I met Jeff Healey when I was really young, guitar player, and he really took me under his wing, and I was quite lucky. Those guys were, they were partying and everybody was drinking and having fun, but they really kind of looked out for me. I think because they kind of, everybody knew I was sort of like the little sister that nobody asked for, so they sort of they kind of, they didn't want any trouble, and they kind of, they did their best to sort of shield me from whatever they could.
Yeah, and you brought up Jeff Healey because he was very instrumental in getting you like a record deal and stuff like that, right?
Jeff I was 15 and he seemed a world away from me at the time, but looking back, I realized he was not that much older than I was. He was like 20, I think Jeff was 22, I think, when we met. So he was just a baby himself. And the trio that he was playing with, the Jeff Healey band, they were managing themselves, and they had this little management company, and they had a bit of money because they had gotten themselves, they had gotten a record deal. I think he had one record under his belt when I met him, and it had been quite successful, and they were looking for another act to manage, and I sort of fell into their lap. I met him through like a friend of a friend of a friend of his girlfriend's cousin of his boy, somebody's cousin, and Jeff just really liked me, and he took me to the other two guys, and he was like, hey, maybe she could be the act that we manage. And so they took me on. I got a record deal right away. I think I was maybe 17, and I remember because my parents had to sign it. It was a deal with a deal with Columbia, the U.S., and my parents had to sign it because I wasn't old enough to be a signatory on the deal. But I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I was a baby, and it sort of started to become evident that I wanted and needed a little more time to kind of marinate. I was still touring. I was getting my club legs underneath me, and it was the best decision I ever made. And Columbia knew. They knew that I wasn't ready. And so that deal sort of came to an end. And I spent a little more time touring. Sometimes I would tour with Jeff. Sometimes I would tour. I did a couple of months with him as doing backup for him. And then I started touring on my own. And we started opening for people like we were on. That's what back when we were opening for like Tom Cochran, and people like that. And we did all kinds of dates. And then I got another record deal, and and the rest was sort of history after that. But it was that formative period. I don't know that people really get that anymore, but it was invaluable for me.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they do anymore because either they're signed young and thrust out there, or now with kind of social media, they just kind of do it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, which I guess, is its own thing. And there's a lot of credit to be given there. I mean, if you can sit in your bedroom and make a whole record yourself, that's great. I personally think it's funny. I'm talking to you on a break right now. We're rehearsing for the summer shows that we're going to be doing, one of which is this show in Halifax. And I'm always reminded when we come back together how valuable it is to be in a room with other people and bounce stuff off of, I've been in the studio myself, kind of by myself or with, one or two other people for the last few months. And it's such a breath of fresh air to be in a room with a group of people and play music, just play live music and just play around and mess around and fool around and have some fun. And that's how I think, I am definitely the most creative when I'm surrounded by other people and you have a chance to kind of, to fool around a little bit, make mistakes. That's some of the greatest things, some of the greatest, work I think I've ever been a part of started off as a mistake, where somebody plays something and you're like, oh, what's that? That wasn't right, but what is it?
Yeah, there is something to like just the natural flow of creativity in a room with a bunch of people.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally
Totally.
get that. Circling back on management a little bit, I saw online that you turned down Clive Davis. That was like the guy behind Whitney Houston and Alicia Keys.
I didn't. Well,
How did you get to that decision to go, no, I'm good?
Yeah, I didn't, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Okay.
I didn't turn Clive down, but Clive was around because Clive was the president of Arista, which was Jeff's record label. So,
Okay.
I was, it's funny because a lot of those guys, Tommy Mottola, who at the time was married to Mariah Carey, he was the head of Columbia. Clive was running Arista. Walter Afanasieff was still working with Mariah. There were a lot of like sort of foundational names that I don't know that necessarily people remember anymore, but it was a really heady period for music. There was a window there in like that was sort of the early to mid kind of 90s where there were a lot of like there was a ton of money in music, first of all, and there was a ton of kind of influence. They were like those big top three labels had a stranglehold on radio. So to kind of be a 16-year-old kid and be in those rooms, I wasn't always like the center of attention, but just to be in those rooms, you learned, so much. You really got to kind of be up close and personal with a lot of people. And I don't think at the time I really realized it. They were just guys, to me, they were like old men, right? They were just like dudes who came to the gigs, and you'd be like, oh, there's Clive, there's Tommy, whoever, and you always knew they were in the room because they like roll up, 8 deep in a limo, but still to me, it was just, I was just happy to be there.
Yeah, and I can imagine like with the power of your voice, I can imagine a lot of people were kind of in those rooms going, now, what if we took you and made you sound like this? Like, I imagine there was a lot of like, we can package you and make you sound this certain way or that certain way, as opposed to just letting you do kind of what you want to do, which is what you've been doing most of your career.
Yeah, I mean, it was, the obvious comparison. Well, no, actually, that's the wrong word to use. The comparison at the beginning, which I don't know that this still goes on today, but back in my day, the number one comparison for anybody who could sing like, pass a high G with like any kind of full force, full throated singing, any chick singer anyway, was Janis Joplin. And
Right.
that was something I was very conscious of because, I was a Janis Joplin fan. I wasn't like a super fan, but, my dad had her records and I knew who she was and I knew the songs. But I was always really careful to kind of stay out of that end of the pool because I didn't want to get, first of all, nobody can sing those songs like she could. And number two, I didn't want to get kind of boxed in to that. I was also I was a big pop radio fan. I was a big hip hop fan. And I really wanted to be able to kind of try to incorporate my own influences, which took, I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out. It takes a lifetime. I think it was Miles Davis who said, like, it takes a lifetime to learn to play like yourself because you just have to keep doing it. And the more you do it, the more you exercise that muscle, the better you get at it. And the more you really start to know yourself and why you like the stuff that's in your set that, works for you and all that kind of stuff. And I think the audience really responds to that.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think why your songs have stood the test of time is that emotional connection, not only for the audience, but like we hear it in your voice, right? So,
Right.
it's like, oh, okay, this is real as opposed to disposable.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and you mentioned like growing into yourself, and it takes a lifetime, really. But you had that kind of 20-year gap, and I know there was a lot of legal stuff in there that can weigh on the mind and stuff. But what did you get to learn about you during that time away?
Everything. It's funny. I keep saying to people and nobody believes me, but like I, it was truly, I think I was just turning 30 when that happened. And at the time, it seemed cataclysmic. It seemed insurmountable. It seemed like the worst thing that had ever happened to me because I really had been, first of all, I'd been surrounded by the same people for the entire formative part of my life and career. And that's a huge gap from like 15 to 30, right?
Mhm.
That 15-year time period is huge. So it was traumatic in that sense. It was personally traumatic, but it was also, uh, a huge, just like being pushed off a cliff. I didn't, suddenly I was sort of free falling by myself. There's this infrastructure that springs up around you when you do this job out of necessity mostly. There's people are rushing to fill those roles. Like, what do you need? What can we get you? What do you're sort of not really doing anything for yourself out of necessity because you're busy. Like you have
Sure.
things to do.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky because my parents were always very supportive and they were in the picture, but they weren't trying to run my life. So it was a very delicate balance. It was hard to learn how to be, how to cope because you miss that opportunity. There's a window where I think most people, you graduate from high school, maybe you get married, maybe you're having a kid, maybe you get your pets, you move, you are decorating a house, whatever it is you're doing, you get your first job. And that's how you accrue those coping skills. And I kind of missed that window. So I did that late. And I always say, like, I thought this was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me because it made me exactly who I was supposed to be. And I never, ever would have walked that path had it not happened. It was absolutely, totally what I needed. And I look back now and I realize that, I got so lucky because I really would have turned into a completely different person and not necessarily somebody that I would have been, happy with.
Yeah, I mean, especially again, like you said, with that infrastructure around you,
Hmm.
you never have to grow up.
That's
Like
right.
you can be, like you started having that infrastructure around, 16, 17, 18. You would have been kind of still at that age.
Yeah, it really, I mean, people, I don't know who it was who said it, but somebody said, for people who get famous, and I'm hardly, I mean, I'm not Beyonce, but there are, whatever, stepping into the public eye, whatever year of your life you kind of get famous, that really is kind of a lot where a lot of people stop growing. It stunts you because you, as I said, you don't really have to develop those coping skills. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to read. You don't have to like, you don't have to pay your own bills. You don't have to buy your own food. You don't have to do anything. And that stuff sounds like the minutia of life. That why would you want to do that stuff anyway? And I'm not saying that it's, it's glamorous, or that it's that's all we should aspire to, but it is those are valuable building blocks to becoming a whole person in life. You have to be able to you have to be able to cope. It makes you a better creative, like it makes you a better creative person, because it makes you better able to shepherd your own work through the process. I've become far less dependent, and there's a lot less between me and the work now than there used to be. There are fewer steps, there's fewer people, there are fewer voices in the studio, there are fewer steps to get it made. And that is, I think, a hugely invaluable part of what we do.
Yeah, and in that time too, kind of the walls came down between you and the fan as well, thanks to, social media and stuff like that. So now you can have
Yeah. Hmm.
a closer interaction with that. How have you been finding that since you've been back at it?
It took me, it's funny, but I thought I really had it. Like when I came back, and, I jumped onto Instagram and I was like, oh, I understand what this is, but I really didn't. I kind of, there's a rhythm to it. It's funny. I don't know about you, but I find like people are sort of, I don't know, there seems to be sort of fatigue right now. I find there's like a certain level of online fatigue right now with people kind
100%.
of,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's probably due in part to the world that we live in, and that a lot of people are spending a lot of time just doom scrolling all the time. But I also think that even for stuff that isn't related to sort of social issues or politics, even if it's just art and creative stuff, it's awesome because I find it most of the time extremely entertaining. And I love, it keeps me absolutely connected to things that I wouldn't necessarily have discovered otherwise. It's a lot of how I find a lot of great music. But I myself, I find I go through phases. Like there'll be phases where I'm posting all the time, and I'm not naturally somebody who feels compelled to like express an opinion about everything, which I think is a very fine line. I think that a lot of people, perhaps younger than me, feel the need. You feel the need to like constantly be um, uh, emoting and like expressing an opinion about everything that's happening. I don't find that, but what I do find is that once I get rolling, posting creative stuff, I love it, and I really, really love like getting feedback, and I just like doing it. It's fun,
Mhm.
but I don't do it all the time. So I'm sort of like right now I'm in sort of a contraction, because I'm busy, you know,
Yeah, yeah. Well, busy rehearsing for the tour,
for the
and
tour. Yeah, exactly.
and so yeah, like I said, so back at it for a couple of years now. And how are you feeling, being back, and kind of on a regular basis now, doing the whole thing again, touring? You had the album. Are we working on another album?
I
Things like that.
am right now. Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to make a record. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. There's this big debate going on right now. Is the album dead? Like, is there
Mhm.
is there any point in making records anymore? I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I'm leaning right now towards singles, which I think is super cool. Because when I came up, there was sort of my parents' generation, I guess. My parents had a huge singles collection, and that's how I learned a lot of songs. Was just going through, for your younger listeners, we used to have these records called 45s. And, and you would you would put, I can't remember what the thing is called that you put in the middle of it, but there was this cool plastic thing you'd stick in the
Yeah, I
middle of the
forget the name of
45.
that too.
Yeah. And put it on the record player. And that's how I learned a lot of songs. Um, and it feels like we're sort of heading back in that direction where people are just, they just make stuff. And I think that's great. It's cheaper. It's more direct, it's easier, and it's sort of one and done. And then you can be on to the next thing, which for me as a creative person, I take a long time, but once I'm done with it, I'm done with it. And I kind of never want to hear it again. I'm just sort of like, oh yeah, that was fun. That was great. Well, okay, what are we doing now? So I think a lot of people, creative people, feel that way. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing now. And but getting back to being out on the road. It's funny. I said to my manager the other day, I'm like, my is real obviously new, but I was saying to him the other day, it never occurred to me that because we had done, sort of some dates in that intervening period, and I knew where I was. physically and creatively, and that I could still do it. But I said to him, I'm like, it never occurred to me that like all the people around me must have been thinking like, oh my God, can she still even do this? It's been like 20 years. Can she still, like, what does she even look like now? Can she sing? Is it, um, I came out, bursting out with a lot of natural enthusiasm and confidence. And I've been just, what's been shocking to me is how closely held these songs, the old songs in the catalog, are for the people who come to the shows. I think I kind of missed that in the beginning. I wasn't really aware of the impact of the material on people, that people have birthdays and weddings and births and deaths and divorces and marriages and all that kind of stuff to these songs. So to see the overwhelming amount of enthusiasm with which the shows have been greeted and these songs have been received has been very touching. It really has. It's been very moving for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, because, you've had a Diamond album, which I think like maybe 20 people have done in Canada. So it's like,
Hmm.
and when you think about that, that definitely means there's a lot of impact out there. So I know when it was announced, it was like, oh, we got Lenny Kravitz and Amanda Marshall. People were like, I think equally excited. It was like Lenny, awesome, but Amanda Marshall's like it was interesting to see. It sometimes you almost felt bad for Lenny. It was like, oh,
Oh, well, that's don't feel too bad for Lenny.
it's
Lenny's
hard
good,
to. As a
but
guy, it's
as a
really
guy.
hard to feel bad for Lenny.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm particularly happy that it's an outdoor show, because these open air shows in the summertime, it's such a um it's kind of not rare, but it's a particularly valuable opportunity in Canada, because we don't get to do this all year round. So, versus living in, California or Florida or whatever, it's in a place with a more temperate climate. It really, I think people really appreciate it. And I think the audiences really relish the thought. I know I do as a fan, coming out in the summer to see a show. It's the perfect setting for it. So we can't wait. I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah, we're stoked. So, last couple of questions ever. One thing I saw online, because we talk about fans' excitement.
Mhm.
Apparently, from what I read, and again, you never know if it's all true or not, but fans have been kind of saying, "Hey, do a Christmas album" for years.
I just had this discussion with somebody yesterday. Okay, here's the deal with me and Christmas. I don't hate Christmas music, but I have written Christmas songs. There is a Christmas song of mine floating around out there on the internet for the very enterprising who want to go and find it. And my mother keeps telling me to act. I've never actually recorded it. I did it live once somewhere, and someone recorded it and they threw it up on the internet. I've never listened to it again. I My thing is, does anybody really need to hear me sing Little Drummer Boy? No, they don't. Does anybody need to hear me sing like Joy to the World? No, they don't. They don't need to hear. So, I'm kind of torn, because it's hard to. I don't know that anybody wants like a full album of original Christmas songs either. I love other people's Christmas records, by the way. I love, like, I'm not, no shade to anybody else who makes Christmas records. I love Christmas records. I like listening to other people's Christmas records. Ah, maybe someday. I don't know.
And you don't want to get Mariah Carey, like, where she's become like a living meme for the beginning of Christmas.
Well, I mean, Mariah had it right. She got in early, she got the song, it's funny because somebody asked me, I don't like, I'm not, tight with Mariah, but I know people who know Mariah, and I know that's a real thing. Like, that is real. Like,
Yeah,
she really loves Christmas. She really does love all things Christmas, and I think that's probably why it's so successful, because people can see that her natural ebullience and enthusiasm for the season shines through every year right after Halloween, when she's like, "Okay, it's time." She has managed to commercialize and monetize something that is, I think, very true to her. So, good for her.
yeah. I mean, and like you were saying, we don't get to do the outdoor shows in the winter, so we can't defrost Amanda Marshall for Christmas. Like,
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But I'll tell my mother that people are on her side. She'll like that.
yeah, yeah, share it with her, and then she'll bug you more.
Yes, exactly.
And last thing I saw, apparently you're a big fan of true crime. What draws you to that? And a weirdest question: do you have a favorite kind of story? Because I am kind of drawn to it as well, and I'm like a tad obsessed with the Zodiac killer. So
Oh my God. Oh, you're the first person who's ever asked me that. And I don't know how anybody would know I was obsessed with true crime. I must have mentioned this like years ago. But yeah, it's funny because like everybody else, I don't read nearly as much as I should anymore. But um, when I was a kid, I think I get it probably from my dad because my dad was, he was always bringing books into the house, and he was a true crime fan. So I think the first one he gave me was Read Drum the Innocent,
Okay.
which was it was the Nicole Morin story, and the Guy Paul, what was his name? Guy Paul,
Oh,
it's a Canadian story, but anyway, and he was wrongly convicted, and that for some reason really whet my appetite. That book got me. The other thing I love is mob stories, so the two sort of are intertwined. So people always give me books like mob books and true crime books. I was a big Anne Rule fan for a long time. I haven't read a lot of her recently, but yeah, that was like my whole teenage life. I remember I took a cross country trip with my parents in the car, and I was maybe, I don't know, I was maybe 8 or 9, which seems really young to be reading true crime books, but my dad will always give them to me. And I was lying on the back seat of the floor of the back seat of the car, and I was reading, oh, what was it? The book about it was two guys, it was two serial killers in California, and their names
oh,
have gone completely out of my head now. There was
I
a
think
famous case.
yeah, I think I know who you're speaking. I can't
Yeah.
remember their names now
And
either, but
they were
yeah.
running like an auto body shop, and it was like a whole thing. And I just remember like the whole trip being like, Dad, oh my God, you have to hear that. And I was like reading the book to my father. He was like, I'll read it when we get home. But yeah, I used to be completely through my teens and early 20s, totally obsessed.
Yeah, it's my wife shares it too. It's like Saturday morning, we get up, it's like before the day starts, like we have to watch Dateline. What a great way to start the weekend. But you know,
Well, it's funny because I'm not a big podcast listener either, but I was really into oh gosh, Serial, obviously
yep.
the first
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
and S Town was another big one that I loved. Even though that kind of didn't really go anywhere for me, but I still loved it. So all that kind of stuff, and the one about oh, what's his name? The dude in North Carolina who killed his wife and his son.
What is his name? Yes.
The
They were the
Murdoch,
Murdoch.
Alec
That's it.
Murdoch.
Yes, Murdoch. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I was really into that as well. So
Yeah.
those are the sort of the more recent ones.
Yeah. And those are if you go back in history, like honestly, and you like mob stuff and stuff like that too. I went back and read the Gangs of New York book.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've read it. Yeah.
And there's a follow-up, and now the name is that's on San Francisco
Oh.
by the same guy, and it is amazing.
Oh, I'll
Um,
have to check it out.
yeah, because the history of San Francisco is crazy and
Yeah.
definitely worth reading. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're now that you're back touring, if you want to kill some time on a bus,
I
there you
need
go.
something to take in. I need something to read in my bunk.
Exactly. That is awesome. We can't wait to have you back in town. We're
I can't
very, very
wait.
excited.
We are too. I can't wait. I can't wait to see all the changes.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? We'll hop on a harbor hopper.
Perfect. If you see somebody wandering around Spring Garden Road looking for the old Le Chateau store, that's me.
Yeah, I think it's gone.
Oh man, where am I going to buy my outfit for the show?
Thank you, Amanda, for taking time.